Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name's Jared Mello, and I'm the Shepherd of Black Sheep. Today, I'm going to go over a couple of the new developments of the Nick Reiner case because it turns out he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he was also on a new med before all of this stuff happened. And there's some chilling last words here, too, that Rob Reiner was telling people at this party. He was saying things along the lines of, wow, I think my kid could actually hurt me. I'm terrified of my son. And honestly, if that's how you feel as a parent about one of your children, I know it's tough. And especially since it's one of your kids, you don't want to think that. But if that's what you're thinking, you do have to trust your gut. And unfortunately, this situation absolutely proved it. So you have to take every precaution, if not for your own safety, but for everyone else's safety as well, because we have seen the tragic outcome here. But before I go into this video that we're going to watch, hello there, Ellie. Welcome to the chat. I want everyone to watch the Dr. Salerno and Christian John interview that I uploaded today. That was pretty cool. I was able to break the ice between all three of them there, and we had a good discussion about things. And there's plenty of room for more discussion, too. There's more things that if we had more time, I would have talked about them, but I just kind of ran out of time. But Ellie, how are you this evening? And did you check out the old Christian and Dr. Salerno interview? All right. But what I'll do as I wait for people to roll in here, we'll start the old interview. Not the interview. We'll start the video, I should say. And this is... what's the name of this channel? Hidden Truths, I think it's called. Oh, we'll see.
The geniuses, the brilliant ones, the people. I'm referring to myself. If you're curious.
The Reiner case is becoming a devastating study in how tragedy can unfold in plain sight. Today's update is a difficult one. New details are emerging about...
And again, this is Nick here. Just look at how he looks in comparison to the rest of the family. Just way in his own universe. And I've also been hearing some, I think, smear campaigns. People are saying, oh, Rob Reiner would invite all of his friends over to SA, his son. I really don't think that's true. I think that's more of a smear campaign. If anyone has evidence of that, yeah, let me know where you found it. But I don't think there's any evidence of that. And that's a pretty big thing to accuse somebody of, honestly. And it's similar to how I feel about the Erica Kirk situation. People throw around this, they're in on it so willy-nilly. It's like, man, not always. I think people should be a little more careful before they throw around those severe accusations about things. But the rest of the family looks pretty good. His mother, maybe not.
mental illness and missed warning signs. New information that could fundamentally change how this case is viewed, not just legally, but emotionally. What we're learning now adds layers.
Is the audio still low? Is my audio low or is the videos low? It shouldn't be low. It's the same volume it is every time. Was he just diagnosed with it? 17 rehabs since age 15. Well, that's why I got turned down. Nick Reiner, was he just diagnosed with 17 rehabs since age 15? Maybe they were just looking at the drug problem. People are saying with the parents should have done, but they were not mental health experts. It's always easy to say things in retrospect, right? Especially when you know the outcome. Dan Carlin said he had a podcast called Hardcore History, and he said one of his history professors said one of the reasons why people don't learn from history is they already know their future. When you already know their future, it is so much more difficult to learn from history because you already know how it turns out. But before you know how it turns out, it's difficult to know sometimes the right thing to do. But this is why they say hindsight is 2020. Nick Reiner is a psychopath. He's not schizophrenic. All the signs were there over the years, and professionals told Rob Reiner that Nick was lying and manipulating them. This was over 10 years ago. Now, considering his actions at the end, sure. But here's the other thing. Addicts will lie and manipulate as well in pursuit of their addiction sometimes. So is every addict a psychopath? Not necessarily. And are all schizophrenics violent? No, not necessarily either. But there's a smaller percentage that can be. And I mean, if someone does something like this, would you automatically assume they're a psychopath then? Perhaps a fair assumption. It might not be like technical, but once someone does like this, something like this, nothing's off the table at that point is what I would say. But again, this is a cautionary tale for people now as well. So if this is the kind of thing that's happening in your family, well, you don't want this to happen to your family. So best to be safe and have precautions, have firm boundaries, be supportive when possible, but you also have to protect your own safety too.
That weren't visible before, and they complicate a story that already felt impossible to comprehend. Last night, my husband, Dr. John Mathias, a criminal psychologist, weighed in on the Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner case based on what we knew so far. And since then, just since you heard from us last night, a flood of new information has come out about Nick Reiner, the night leading up to the murders of his parents and what was happening behind the scenes in the weeks before everything unraveled. We're now learning about a schizophrenia diagnosis, medication changes, growing fear inside the Reiner home, and
that's why I said schizophrenia, because that's the new diagnosis that came out. I'm assuming the professionals were accurate. Of course, someone can give a diagnosis and not be accurate too. People get misdiagnosed all the time.
Party, that Christmas party, that in hindsight may have been the one last warning before everything went wrong. My name is Lauren Mathias, and this is Hidden True Crime. So as we now know, Nick Reiner remains in custody without bail and is being charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of his parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner. Both Rob and Michelle were found stabbed to death inside their Brentwood home on Sunday, December 14th. The Los Angeles County Medical Examiner has officially ruled both deaths homicides caused by multiple sharp force injuries. We now know that their bodies were found in their master bedroom, and we are learning that their bodies were released back to the family on Friday, December 19th. But a full coroner's report is not expected for up to 90 days. Nick is currently on watch, and his arraignment has been pushed back until early January. He has waived his right to a speedy arraignment.
And that's the old suey smock there so that you can't. And as I'm looking at this case, I would not be surprised. I don't think this would be right, but he might just get psychiatric hospital for the rest of his life. That might be too easy on him, honestly, because despite addiction and mental health stuff and personality disorders, none of that's an excuse for violence. It's not an excuse.
So no plea yet, whether guilty or not guilty. And earlier this week, footage of Nick Reiner from about 10 years ago surfaced in a nearly decade-old, 9 years-ish YouTube clip that he put on his own channel where he feigns doing drugs and jokingly threatens a dog.
And that's the video I was playing the other night. And that's a sign too. If you see someone threaten to kill a dog, even if it's joking, that's a little bit of a red flag there. Normal people aren't going to joke about killing a dog in particular. Man's best friend. That's something to be like, something's not quite right here. And you notice in the thumbnail, I saw this picture of him on the left that I included in the thumbnail. It reminded me of Private Pyle in Full Metal Jacket. They got that same kind of look to him, which also goes to show you what a great acting job that dude did who played private pile. His name escapes me right now, but that was a good job because he captured that look, that psychopathic, homicidal look.
2016 video presents him as a mock music mogul named Dee David walking around a wealthy neighborhood while an interviewer asks him questions, sort of like in a mockumentary style. And at one point, his younger sister, Romy, appears in the 6-minute video while a dog barks in the background. And Nick jokes, "I'm going to go fucking kill that fucking dog," end quote. He's also shown smoking and pretending to snort white powder, arranged to look like drugs, with an off-camera voice asking, quote, "You bought heroin off a transvestite?" And so throughout the clip, Nick riffs on various absurd questions and interacts with neighbors in his exaggerated persona. At one point, he raps, quote, "And I don't even care if anyone calls me a Sally because I'm a snail and I'm never going to fucking fail. And you know, you're going to have to bail me out of jail."
Prophetic of him there. But this sounds like what? Like the stunted development of a kid that was super rich, plus personality disordered and mentally ill. And so then he runs to all these addictions that compounds everything. An addiction, meth, heroin, what was the other one that he did? Maybe coke or crack. That has never helped any mental illness ever, whether it's schizophrenia or a personality disorder, etc. No, it doesn't help any of those things. So that's the vibe I get from Nick Reiner, just like a kid in an adult's body mentally. But the dangerous part is they're in the adult body and they're going to do adult things, which is terrifying for everyone else involved.
She moved to Patagonia. What was it?
Vaselina.
I guess it could have been pretty awkward when PETA approached you about joining their team.
I'm gonna go kill that fucking dog.
The source described,
He just seems like a little pissant there. Like, honestly, like my dad, if that was his son, probably would have like smacked him. And granted, like the too much of a coddling approach certainly didn't work either, right? So with a guy like him, it's hard when it's your son, but if you see your son being like a pissant, it's like, dude, like what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, it just seems like snivelly, immature, entitled, arrogant, all these negative things. Makes you just not like him.
him as creative and misguided, noting that growing up around Hollywood A-listers shaped his sense of entitlement. And according to the source, the hardest thing for Nick was following through on his ideas. He would often abandon anything that he didn't find exciting, according to the source.
Well, time out here. So Black Sheep, is that this woman, Lauren Matthias? What are her recent histrionics? We can go over them. I'm not familiar with them. Maybe that's something to go over next. So let me know, Black Sheep.
Many people had been questioning whether that footage was proof of some potential mental health issues, given the strangeness in the content and how it sort of led in all sorts of directions, or if it was just maybe a young man who was a little bit odd, per se. That mental health question seems, though, now to be being answered right now. One of the most significant updates in this case is confirmation from multiple sources that Nick Reiner had been diagnosed with schizophrenia prior to the killings. According to insiders with firsthand knowledge to outlet TMZ, Nick had been under the care of a psychiatrist and was actively receiving treatment for serious mental illness. Sources say doctors were in the process of adjusting his medications in the 3 to 4 weeks leading up to the murders, attempting to stabilize him, but were unsuccessful.
And generally, they give people with schizophrenia antipsychotics. They'll give them something like Abilify or Seroquel or Zyprexa or Geodon. And ultimately, they should also give them another kind of mood stabilizer too, something like a Lamictal or a lithium, because you want to try to cut off the ups and downs a little bit. But starting the new meds is actually one of the more dangerous times too, I think. Or quitting meds, that's another dangerous time because you just don't know. You don't know how your body's going to react to it. But again, Meds can't be the excuse either. Like, he did this. Ultimately, you still have to have responsibility over your actions. Always.
Several people now close to the situation describe Nick's behavior during this period as alarming, erratic, and dangerous. One source said that after a medication change, Nick was, quote, out of his head. And another said the medication appeared to worsen his instability rather than improve it. It's also being reported that Nick's ongoing substance abuse significantly worsened his schizophrenia, which is something medical professionals have repeatedly warned can happen when those two issues intersect. As we've been learning, Nick Reiner's struggle with addiction is not new, but the scope of it is staggering. Since the age of 15, as a young teen, Nick has reportedly been in rehab more than 18 times. His substance use included heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine. And despite access, of course, to elite facilities, top doctors, and immense financial resources from his family, nothing seemed to stick. At times, Nick reportedly chose homelessness over staying in treatment. He resisted strict rehab rules and felt residential treatment stripped him of his autonomy. Some professionals familiar with cases like Nick's say this is not uncommon, especially for patients who feel confined, controlled, or punished rather than treated. Nick had recently been receiving care, according to sources, at a high-end Los Angeles rehab facility specializing in both mental illness and substance abuse, a facility reportedly frequented by wealthy and influential families and costing around $70,000 a month.
And honestly, even when there's mental health involved, but when it comes to an addiction, I think some more tough love, it's actually the time for that. Consequences and tough love. And that's what things like, or places like AA and AA, that's what they used to do. They used to tell you, sit down and shut up. And nowadays they would say, oh my goodness, that's so invalidating and ridiculous. But looking back at it, I would say, you know what? That's probably what a lot of them need. They need to learn that humility. They need to learn to take a step back and try to respond rather than react and kind of get put in their place, honestly. And again, people would say, well, it's not their fault. They're mentally ill. It's like, true. But we have to take ownership of what's going on. If we don't take ownership of what's going on, then we're just going to be led by our nose, by our addictions and mental health and personality disorders. And you can't let that happen. You can't let that happen. So I think doing that approach, people might think it's tough in this day and age, like, oh my goodness, they're so hard on people. But I would say, you know what? Considering what the possible consequences are, that's what they need. And would have been better for everyone too. That's where even sometimes jail, I don't think, is the worst thing for people in some cases. Now, in other cases, will it make them worse? Sure. That's also true. And again, that's what makes it tough, because there's going to be no one size fits all solution for each person. For one person, going to jail might turn them around. For other people, it just makes them worse, and they find all of the wrong people, and maybe they develop psychopathic fleas, as I would call it. But again, when it comes to addiction, that addiction part, labeling it as a disease, as they do in the rooms, and that spiritual component, I think that's helpful in a way, because a lot of it touches on the things that they really need to work on. So it's not perfect. Like AA and NA is not going to treat schizophrenia, but I do think it does a pretty good job at treating addiction if they only do it. That's the problem. Most people, they don't follow the way, and they don't follow the way, then they don't get successful results.
And yet, even there, doctors were struggling to stabilize him. One addiction treatment expert later described Nick as a, quote, treatment provider's worst nightmare. An adult patient with schizophrenia, severe addiction, repeated relapses, and no legal mechanism for parents to force him to stay in care. And that's a key point. Nick was an adult. No matter how scared Rob and Michelle were, they legally could not make him stay in treatment. He was their child, but he was an adult. And now we need to talk about the party.
And that's the other thing. Unless you're, I think they would call it Section 8 or 9 or whatever it's called. But you used to be able to get committed, where you're committed against your will. But unless that's what's going on, when you're over 18, you can always sign yourself out. and you can sign yourself out, and then that's it. So at that point, it's up to the parents to do and have some consequences for their kid. Now, George made a good point here too. And he had said $70,000 a month with no results is a sham. And I would say many rehabs are absolutely a sham, because what do? The best thing a rehab does is it gets you away from a drink or a drug for 30 days or 90 days or whatever it is. But the treatment facilities that have the best success are longer term programs, maybe 3 to 6 months at minimum. Those have much better effects. But what does it take? It takes the willingness for that person to be there and try to follow through. If they sign themselves out and just do their own thing, it's not going to help. There's nothing they can do. And I know this. I used to work in the rehab industry, by the way. So, like, granted, it's not useless, but here's the thing. Everyone who's there, they get out of it what they put in. If they don't put anything into it and they're closed, you can't help someone who's closed. And that's the thing that no family wants to hear. They want to hear there's going to be a magic wand. You go to rehab, they'll wave the magic wand over your head, and everything will be different. But it always requires that person to at least open at some point. Now, here's the thing where I'll give you a bright side. I have also heard, even if people don't want to go in the beginning, they might develop the willingness while they're there. That can happen. I wouldn't bank on it, but that can happen too. Now, I'm also curious about this 9-hour stream of histrionics, Black Sheep. You had said the 9-hour stream, which followed Lauren's claims that an ex-friend of hers was harassing her via TikTok. Lots of backlash in the true crime community, and her husband is a psychologist. Oh, thank you. Forget me nots. So what is she accusing the friend of? Claims that an ex-friend of hers was harassing her. So do you think that's more of like a paranoia thing, or a smear campaign, or is she right? I don't know. I'm speaking out of turn here because I don't know the situation. I think it's not about fixing the person. How do you protect yourself? Should they have had security against their son? That would have been the things to do on their side of the street, right? If Rob Reiner says, as she's about to say in this video, you're terrified of your son, you think he can hurt you. Well, now, it wouldn't be going too far to do something like that, to protect yourself. But no parent wants to think that their son's going to go all the way and do what he did, right? It's a bitter pill, but knowing that this is a possibility, if you're a parent out there and you've caught yourself being scared of your kid, well, something to consider. Definitely something to consider. I would say 9 hours does seem like overkill. I saw the stream. I didn't click on it. I was like, what the hell is going on here? Num, welcome. I'm going to go to my parents' place tomorrow to see if I could find any old baseball team photos of him. That'd be great, considering what you're telling us the other night, being on the Little League team with him.
The Christmas party, the one at comedian Conan O'Brien's home, because nearly every update circles back to this Christmas party. A variety of voices saying different things happened, but multiple sources say Nick and his parents got into a heated, escalating argument at the party, particularly between Nick and Rob. Witnesses say the argument became loud. It became intense. It was deeply uncomfortable for many of the guests at this party. At least one person reportedly suggested calling the police, and another said that Nick...
Look at that. That's just got those crazy eyes, man. As a professional face reader, you look at that guy's face and troubling. That's just the only word for it. Troubling and be careful. I don't really get that from Rob Reiner there. Again, Rob Reiner might have his own issues. I'm not saying he doesn't. But compared to his son here, gives you a shiver.
Should be placed on a psychiatric hold. But according to insiders, Conan O'Brien stepped in and shut that down, telling guests it was his house his party and he wasn't calling the police. Several guests later said that they were deeply disturbed by Nick's behavior that night. Some described him as erratic, others as frightening. Some said he was acting creepy, approaching guests, freaking everyone out, is another quote from someone at the party. Comedian Bill Hader was reportedly among the guests who noticed something was off. Perhaps the most haunting detail to come out of this case is what Rob Reiner allegedly told people that night. Multiple sources said Rob confided in either a friend or friends at the party that he was afraid of his son. One source claims Rob said words to the effect of, quote, "I'm petrified of Nick. I never thought I would say this, but I think my own son could hurt me." Another guest.
And again, if that's what you think about your son, now you have a duty as his father to not only protect yourself, but to protect the rest of your family, to protect your wife. And when you don't act, sometimes the worst of things can happen. And this is a case where the worst of things happened. That's why I say it's definitely a cautionary tale.
Later recalled those words at a gathering after Rob and Michelle's deaths, leaving people in tears. So if accurate, it paints a devastating picture of parents who knew something was very wrong, who were scared, but who were also trapped by the limits of the system and the reality of having an adult child in crisis. Well, Nick's attorney, high-profile criminal defense lawyer Alan Jackson, just coming off the Karen Reed case, while he has not publicly commented, multiple outlets report that the defense is expected to pursue a not guilty by reason of insanity plea.
They might actually have a decent chance of getting that, I think. But the good question is this: why didn't Conan want to call the police? And honestly, he just didn't want to ruin the party. So in retrospect, pretty selfish of Conan O'Brien, right? But then again, he probably is just thinking, well, the worst case isn't going to happen, right? He's not going to go home and then murder his parents. Not many people are probably thinking about the worst case, but hindsight being 2020, and in retrospect, you're like, oh, of course you should have called the cops. Of course you should take every precaution, because he's just like creeping people out. But here's the other thing. When you're in Hollyweird over there, like drug use and this kind of creepy behavior from Hollywood kids, it's probably common, if I had to guess. And that also probably makes it tricky. If it's so common, you're like, oh my goodness, just another weird Hollywood kid. But sometimes it's a little worse than just weird, right? Sometimes it's absolutely dangerous.
And honestly, this makes sense. TMZ and other outlets are saying that this case may ultimately hinge on Nick's schizophrenia diagnosis, his medication changes, and his mental state at the time of the killings. Experts say this could become a perfect storm defense, including severe mental illness, substance abuse, medication, instability, and documented erratic behavior leading up to the crime of murdering both of his parents. That doesn't necessarily mean the defense will succeed. What it does mean is this case is likely going to be long. It's going to be complex. It will be deeply controversial. The situation is turning out to be much more than a murder case. It is becoming a case about warning signs, missed opportunities, parental fear, and what happens when severe mental illness and addiction collide with a system that often cannot or will not intervene until it's too late.
Ugh.
The holidays can quietly throw everything off. Routines change, schedules get past discussion of an actual diagnosis. Let's talk a little bit more about schizophrenia. This diagnosis will undoubtedly be at the center of nearly every conversation surrounding what happened in this case going forward. And it is also one of the most misunderstood mental illnesses. Schizophrenia is a chronic brain disorder that affects how a person processes reality. How a person processes reality. Think about that. It changes.
And Leah in the chat just made a good point. She said Conan and Ryan probably didn't call the cops out of respect for Rob. And that's probably exactly right. He probably didn't want to embarrass Rob in the situation. And it would probably embarrass him a little bit more so than he already was. So maybe he didn't want to make a bigger scene out of it. So that makes sense to me too.
The way that someone thinks, changes the way they perceive the world, the way they understand what's happening around them. This isn't about mood swings or a personality flaw. It is not something a person can just will themselves out of. For many people, schizophrenia means their brain is giving them information that feels absolutely real, even when it is not real. That disconnect from reality is what makes this illness so dangerous in certain situations. People with schizophrenia can experience hallucinations, often hearing voices that others cannot hear. They can develop delusions, beliefs that feel unshakably true to them, even when there is no evidence to support them. Thoughts can become disorganized or jump rapidly from one idea to another, making communication difficult. Paranoia is also common, especially the belief that others are trying to hurt them, trying to control them or deceive them. One of the hardest parts of schizophrenia is something called lack of insight. Many people with the illness do not recognize that they are sick. From their perspective, the world is wrong, not them.
And I do see this. I mean, I've had a friend that was, interesting story as an aside. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was also an addict, but he didn't think he was schizophrenic. He thought that he was really seeing angels and demons, and he wrote a book about it. He wrote a book about his encounter with the devil. And I read the book, and I read the book as if it was true, because I do truly believe that he thinks it's true. And I've heard Jordan Peterson say in the past that schizophrenics can have one foot in the spiritual world and one foot in the real world. And I would say, you know what? I'm not completely dismissing that, honestly. But the point of this is he didn't think he was schizophrenic. But when he would do his speed, that was his drug of choice, it would absolutely make his symptoms worse. And then what would happen to him was he wasn't able to work, because the second he got stressors, the stressors would make his mental health symptoms worse. And then he would start having some delusions and getting some paranoid fantasies or some paranoia about things. And then he would get fired. But that's what would happen to him. But it's very interesting. It's certainly not cut and dry. Let's put it like that. And there's different versions of it too.
That means their reactions, their extreme ones, can feel logical or necessary inside their own mind. And when someone loses insight, their ability to make safe, rational decisions can disappear along with it. But this is important to say this very clearly. The vast majority of people with schizophrenia are not violent. They are far more likely to be harmed than to harm anyone else. But violence can occur in certain high-risk situations that usually involves untreated or poorly treated psychosis, intense paranoia, active hallucinations, or delusions involving fear or perceived threats. When you add sudden medication changes, emotional instability, or substance abuse into the mix, the risk drastically increases. And in those moments, a person may believe they're acting in self-defense, responding to a threat that feels very real to them, or following internal commands they don't understand how to resist. From the outside, the behavior looks horrifying. From inside the illness, it may feel unavoidable. Schizophrenia is typically treated with antipsychotic medications, which work by altering brain chemistry to reduce hallucinations and those delusions. But finding the right medication, the right dose, is rarely simple. There is no single drug that works for everyone. Treatment often involves trial and error. Doctors adjust dosages, switch medications, monitor side effects, and hope to find something that brings stability without causing intolerable problems.
And the issue with that is, too, if someone's still using, that trial and error of trying to find new medicines that work becomes even harder. But I haven't heard this, but have people mentioned if Nick was even clean at this point, or was he still using? I mean, I haven't heard much about that part of it. But if he was still using, that makes everything worse. It's not going to make anything better. But this is the thing with mental health, right? It's so important. And it's so difficult, because I always use the equation or the analogy that your mental health is like seeing the world through a tinted lens. And maybe the tinted lens is anxiety. Maybe it's depression. Maybe it's schizophrenia. But whatever it is, it influences everything. And until you're in a good mental health spot, you're going to be influenced by that mental illness. Guaranteed.
And during this adjustment period, symptoms can actually get worse. People can become more agitated, more paranoid, more impulsive. or emotionally distressed. Confusion can increase. Judgment can deteriorate. And if medications are changed too quickly, stopped too abruptly, or mixed with drugs or alcohol, instability can spike dramatically. Sources in this case have said Nick's doctors were actively trying to adjust and fine-tune his medication in the weeks before the killings, and that stability had not been achieved yet. Clinicians often describe that window as one of the most dangerous times for someone with schizophrenia. Substance abuse complicates schizophrenia in serious ways.
And so someone just said he was apparently clean for 6 years, which is good, but apparently not good enough.
Drugs like methamphetamine, cocaine, even alcohol can intensify hallucinations and paranoia, reduce the effectiveness of medication, and increase impulsivity and aggression. In some cases, substance use can mask symptoms until they suddenly erupt. In others, it can trigger full psychotic episodes or make recovery far more difficult. But it's also important to understand that people living with severe mental illnesses, especially psychotic disorders like schizophrenia, sometimes turn to drugs as a form of self-medication. For some, substances can temporarily quiet intrusive thoughts, numb overwhelming fear, or dull voices and paranoia that feel unbearable.
And I would say, honestly, most people that struggle with addictions, that's what they're doing. They're self-medicating anxiety, depression, or maybe they have a personality disorder and they're using those drugs to medicate those things. Or maybe they're undiagnosed on the spectrum. Could be any number of things. But this guy I interviewed named Drew, he was telling me about his ayahuasca experiences. And he had said, show me one addict that isn't also mentally ill. Show me the addict that isn't self-medicating some sort of mood disorder or something. And he said, I have yet to find the person. He bet someone a steak dinner. And so far, that person hasn't been able to prove him wrong.
In the moment, drugs may feel like the only way to regain a sense of control or relief, even though they ultimately make symptoms worse. What starts as an attempt to cope can quickly spiral into addiction, creating a cycle where the illness fuels substance use and the substance use intensifies the illness. It's not about recklessness or moral failure. It's often about desperation and trying to survive a mind that no longer feels safe. And I want to really stress again that schizophrenia isn't one single fixed condition. It exists on a spectrum. That means symptoms, severity, and functioning can vary widely from person to person and even change over time. Some people experience mild to intermittent symptoms and live fairly stable lives with treatment, while others have more severe psychosis, disorganized thinking, or difficulty distinguishing reality from delusions. Stress, medication changes, substance use, and life events can all influence where someone falls on that spectrum at any given moment. And as we learn more information about this case, my co-host, criminal psychologist Dr. John Mathias, will come back on to talk about schizophrenia and how that diagnosis could have impacted this case. But one of the hardest questions people ask in cases like this is, can a person with schizophrenia be held accountable? In severe psychosis, it is possible for someone to act without fully understanding what they are doing or grasping the consequences of their actions. They may believe they're responding to a threat that doesn't exist. They may misinterpret reality entirely. Their memory of the event can later be fragmented, distorted, or incomplete. That doesn't mean they automatically aren't responsible under the law. That's not what we're saying here. But it does mean intent becomes far more complicated, which is critical in criminal cases. It is possible for someone to physically commit an act while mentally existing in a reality that bears little resemblance to the real one. When a defense team argues not guilty by reason of insanity, they aren't saying a crime didn't happen. They're saying that at the time of the act, the defendant could not understand what they were doing or could not understand that it was wrong.
And even with him, like harking back to the fact that he said that about the dog, I'm pretty sure he knew it was wrong. Now, they're going to use this as a defense, of course, because why wouldn't they? That's what a defense lawyer is supposed to do. But at the same point, if you're the law and you're a prosecuting attorney, you have to protect people. If someone's a danger to themselves or others, you have to take that seriously. And if they've already committed the dangerous crime, then yeah, you got to make sure you damn well protect them from other people, or protect other people from them, I should say. And it's not a get out of jail free card, I would say, either. Like, you just got to protect people.
In schizophrenia cases, this often comes down to medical records, documented diagnosis, medication changes, witness accounts of escalating behavior, and expert psychiatric testimony. The question becomes not just what happened, but what was happening inside the defendant's mind when it happened.
I mean, and this is just me spitballing, I think he knew. I think, and all of this is just going to be his way to get an insanity plea. To Thrive, thank you very much for this. Bob's net worth is over 200 million, but Nick didn't have a 24/7 helper. Well, I bet you it's not that they couldn't afford it. It's that he didn't want it. I bet you Nick was like, no, I don't want that. I don't want to be treated like a babysitter, or treated like I need a babysitter. And like Crazy was saying from the other night, he always wanted to be included in things. He didn't want to be treated like he was some sort of special case. But in reality, he kind of was. He kind of was someone that needed something a little bit different. And I think he would have been better off going to a stupid AA or NA thing. I think that would have been good for him. But apparently he didn't want to do that, which to everyone's detriment now.
And if Nick's defense pursues this strategy, the court will ultimately have to decide whether he was capable of forming criminal intent at that moment. That is a narrow legal question, and it's one juries often struggle with deeply. Talking about schizophrenia doesn't excuse violence. What it does help explain how something so unthinkable can happen, even inside families with resources, access to care, and deep concern. The diagnosis changes the way this case has to be looked at, whether people are ready for that or not. Nothing about learning that Nick Reiner was diagnosed with schizophrenia makes what happened to Rob and Michelle any less horrific. Their deaths are just as devastating and just as unjust. 2 lives were lost in a way no family should ever have to endure, and that truth does not change. But at the same time, this new information forces a more complicated conversation. If Nick was truly in the middle of an unstable schizophrenic episode with medications being adjusted, substance abuse in the background, and his mental state deteriorating, then it's also heartbreaking to imagine what may have been happening inside his mind. He may have been terrified. He may not have understood what was real. He may not have known what he was doing or why he felt the way he did. For some people, that idea sounds like an excuse, I know. But mental illness is not an excuse. It is a reality. And severe mental illness can completely hijack a person's perception of the world, regardless of their upbringing, their bank account, or their last name. Nick may be viewed by many as spoiled, privileged, or a so-called Nepo baby. But no amount of money, influence, or access can magically cure schizophrenia.
And that's true. I mean, addiction and mental health issues and personality disorders, they transcend. They transcend race. They transcend your income level. They transcend gender. They transcend everything. Like, no one's immune to that. But that being said, with Nick here, to me, it's more of a pattern of behavior with him and just being unhinged in a way. And he's kind of been this way for a long time. I don't think it's necessarily, just out of nowhere, he got on a med or stopped the med, and then all of a sudden he became homicidal. I tend to think it was probably building up for a while. He had a lot of this resentment, a lot of anger, and then poof, it came to the surface. That's just my thoughts. I'm not saying I'm definitely correct, but that's the impression I get.
Wealth does not insulate families from psychosis. Fame does not prevent addiction. And no class of people is immune to mental illness spiraling out of control. If anything, this case exposes how powerless families can become when an adult child is severely ill, even when they are scared, even when they are begging for help, even when there are warning signs. This isn't a story with easy villains or clean conclusions. It's a tragedy layered on top of another tragedy, a family broken in ways that feel almost impossible to comprehend. As this case moves forward, Emotions will run high. Opinions will harden. But understanding the role of mental illness doesn't mean forgetting the victims. It means refusing to look away from the full truth. And sometimes the full truth is uncomfortable.
Often the full truth is uncomfortable, let's say. Now, Black Sheep says, was Rob in denial? And I would say at first he wasn't. At first, years ago, they were listening more to the licensed professionals. But I think what happened was Nick was able to successfully manipulate them and tell them things like, those professionals don't really know how to help me. I know how to help me. And what they're saying I need to do isn't what I need to do. And for some reason, Rob believed them, or Rob believed Nick in this regard. And I think that was not the right way to go. And this is where his lack of understanding of addiction and mental health stuff, I think, really hurt him. Because if you are an addict, you would see Nick's behavior and you'd be like, you would know it for what it was. Oh, this is just a person that wants to continue using and doing whatever they want. Of course they're going to say this. They want to keep on using. So another addict would have been able to call that out. But Rob, and you would think in Hollywood he would know this, right? You'd think of all the addicts that are there and all the movies about addiction. But again, maybe there's that disconnect where they think, oh, my life's different. I'm not a movie. But cautionary tale for sure. Why couldn't they do some sort of conservatorship for Nick? I think they could have, but I guess they just didn't. End the drug war today. I do agree with that sentiment too. I do agree with ending the drug war. Anyway, I appreciate you all for letting me inform you. And Conan O'Brien, don't call 911 and Ghostbusters with a or you can call me. But I want to find this Billy Crystal thing because this was fairly troubling. Rob Reiner roast. There it is.
Did anyone see that roast that Billy Crystal did of him? He said a lot of crazy things, talking about how Rob Reiner's into young people.
But what I respect most about Rob is his deep, almost suspicious love for kids. And
I mean, I don't know what year this was, 2000. Could you imagine making that joke today through a 2025 lens? And again, it's one of those things where it makes you think, oh, there's smoke, there's fire.
he freely gives them his time, his money, whatever it takes to get them into the van. But you know,
I'm not touching that one with the 10-foot pole, but you be the judge. But anyways, rest in peace, Rob Reiner, and I hope the story's just about a jealous son that was on drugs. Did anyone see that roast that Billy Crystal did of him? He said a lot of crazy things, talking about how Rob Reiner's into young people.
but what I respect most about Rob is his deep, almost suspicious love for kids, and he freely gives them his time, his money, whatever it takes to get them into the van. But you know,
I'm not touching that one.
I mean, that's a freaking wild roast there, I'll tell you. But here's the other one I want to go over. The behavior panel. There's a new interview. Our new surfaced interview, I should say.
This is another interview with Nick and Rob Reiner. We saw this interview and we knew we had to do it. Greg, tell us about the videos we're going to watch.
Well, interestingly, this is from the same time period as the other interview when Being Charlie was being launched, and they were out and doing press reviews for this, or all kinds of publicity. And we get to see them in a little bit different situation, a little bit better angle, and we get different behaviors.
He was fiery. You don't seem very fiery to me. You seem like you might just...
I get crazy.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
You don't want to set me off.
No, some big blow-ups there.
No, we both can get
You
pretty...
don't roll easily either.
No, we can both get pretty hot, and there were times when we did get hot. But
you weren't like cold like that. He was very loving and compassionate. I just think that he didn't really know what to do.
And so there's the other thing. Reagan, he shut down the mental health facilities that used to be there. I think until the 80s they were there. And then Reagan shut them down. So it has made things a little more difficult. Johnny says, I never like roasts. Being mean just isn't funny to me. And that's the thing. That's like a weird one to joke about to me. Like, even if it is, like, give it a charitable interpretation, completely a joke. I mean, you wouldn't even do that today, right? You wouldn't even joke about kids in that way.
Yeah. Well, here we are again at them talking about them fussing again.
This is a great example of culture. Like, Greg, you've talked about this maybe 6 months ago or so, but like one family is a culture, and we're seeing stuff here like where they're both pacifying on their thumb the exact same way. So much so that like his hands are kind of red, and you can see the blood, like from the pressure, like the blood has left that part of his hand there. And we don't talk about this enough, but a family is its own culture all by itself. It's a system that we grow up inside of, for sure. Two people are a culture. I always deferred when I forget what book I put that in, but macroculture is what we typically think of as culture. Then you got subcultures, and then you got microcultures. Two people are a culture, because if you don't believe that, go home and start signaling the messages that you have with your partner, then walk out in public and try to do the same messages. They don't mean anything. It's the whole reason that body language is hyper cultural. It's always tied to something. And that signaling is assigned by those cultures. So I think it's a really important.
Did you guys ever see that study or see the videos from that study where they took families and they would video them eating from above, and they saw them all start making this, it almost became like a little orchestration of stuff. Thought that was fascinating the way that worked. They almost become one unit as they start moving around.
And Chase, to your point about him rubbing, some of that can be biological. I mean, the behavior patterns of, if you don't believe it, raise animals, horses, dogs, and watch their behavior patterns are identical the way they lay their feet in bloodlines. So it's pretty interesting. Humans are no different. We just don't want to admit that. So
I think about a hereditary pattern of our body language and how we do things. I mean, hey, it makes perfect sense though, doesn't it? Especially, not a coincidence, talk to Dr. Salerno and Christian today. Check that out if you haven't.
Cultures have their own meanings for words. And so for me, I go, well, when he says, I get crazy, you don't want to set me off. I instantly go, so what do you mean by crazy? What does that mean? Does that mean violent behavior? Does that just mean like I'm a little bit argumentative? Or
Mark Bowden here. I like him. I think he's my favorite person on this panel because I think his questions and insights are the most valuable. And that's a great question to ask. Yeah, Nick, what do you mean by crazy? Does that mean violent? Does that mean goofy? Does that mean weird? Let's get more specific here about what that really means.
does it mean I actually go psychotic? So what is he talking about here? Of course, we're not there to interview and go, explain to me exactly what you mean by crazy, because that could mean something different to you than me, to our audience here. But he certainly has no problem in going, hey, I go crazy. You don't want to set me off.
And it's different than what we saw in the first video because he's enunciating every word. He's powerful and telling. He's even got some amusement. But the interesting one to me is watch Rob Reiner's brows go to sorrow when he's saying you're not cold like that. Watch the brow tips in the center rise. That's an interesting dynamic, making me wonder what caused that. We'll never know. But what caused that little rise of sorrow right in his face?
And, the first thing we pick up one of the first things we pick up from mom and dad as we're growing up is how to do conflict. We watch our parents, how they argue, how they avoid stuff, how they soothe themselves, and then we kind of copy that. And we definitely, we're seeing them kind of deal with stress as they're being asked specifically about conflict, which is kind of a double whammy here. That little thumb rubbing thing, I don't think it's a coincidence at all. And I think there's a little blueprint, like you said, Greg.
Interestingly, all cultures, whoever's the alpha in the culture, can introduce new gestures, new movements, and other people emulate. If you watch people around Trump doing that kind of thing in his first presidency, because he did it all the time. But you see it in corporations. I see it all the time. The other one is you'll see it in enclaves, macro, or subcultures, where people develop their own body language, their own signaling that means something only to them.
And that's fascinating to me, the group dynamics at play, because usually there will be people vying for power in a group dynamic. Often one person wins out. And that's how we see it in America, right? One president wins out. Doesn't mean there's no other powerful people, but there's one person. But this happens in businesses. This happens in friend groups where one person can often percolate to the top of the group. And they kind of have what they call the strongest frame, where their emotions and what their thoughts are dictate to the group the most what's going on. A good indicator of this is whose anger is the most respected in a group. Like if someone doesn't like something, who is the person in the group that people look to and say, okay, this person doesn't like something, that's valuable information. We're all not going to like it now, because that happens a lot. But that person would be considered to have the strongest frame.
Sometimes you see those little things, little viruses released, these little lingual viruses, like a specific laugh. People start laughing like that one person. You'll see people in that group start laughing like that, using the same words, obviously, but pronouncing them the same way that person usually pronounces them. Even though it's wrong, they'll start doing it wrong. That's, of course, that's how popular words happen, popular little phrases.
So what did you guys think about the fact that they're both saying, he can say I'm being a little crazy, and they both, there's blame sharing. Neither one of them is pointing at the other. It looks good. It looks friendly, much better.
Yeah, it sounds like in that culture, that's what you do. When you're having conflict, you get crazy and you get set off, and you will be set off. Just as you say, Chase, we work out, the way to do conflict, usually by watching our parents or some of our family in conflict. If we don't see them in conflict, we often don't learn how to do conflict. For some people, they might have witnessed their parents being violent in conflict. And so that can either set them into, well, that's how you do it, or that should never be like that. So, yeah, I wonder, still I go back to, I wonder what getting crazy and being set off looks like. What is that like? Because clearly that's acceptable. Whatever that is, that's what you do.
You know what else little children learn to do from their parents? Lie. They know when their parents are lying, and they learn exactly what their parents do, and they emulate it.
He was fired.
And again, and that's something to be careful of too, right? Because yes, the environment will play a part with your parents. You do learn a lot from them, but it is still possible to be different. And if anything, Nick and Rob prove how different they can be. Now, granted, they can be different in some ways, but similar in other ways. So maybe their body language can be similar in some ways, but personality-wise, not at all. Temperament-wise, not at all. Now, someone asked in the chat before too, where's the proof of his diagnosis? In the video I was just watching with Lauren, she mentioned, I think, the doctors and family and friends of the family, I think, were the ones that said it. I don't know if there's like an official pad that says Nick Reiner diagnosed with schizophrenia and this is his medicine, but that's what they're saying. That's word on the street.
You don't seem very fiery to me. You seem like you might just...
I get crazy.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
You don't want to set me off.
No. Some big blow-ups there.
No, we both can get
You
pretty...
don't roll easily either.
No, we can both get pretty hot, and there were times when we did get hot. But
you weren't like cold like that. He was very loving and compassionate. I just think that he didn't really know what to do.
Maybe not 18 rehab.
And even in this interview, Nick does seem much more confident and sure of himself than the other interviews we were going over. He seems a little more talkative and more confident, for lack of a better word. And maybe that means he's on something here too. That's always possible.
Have you might have gotten there quicker, or no?
I think it needed to happen the way it happened. I was a real nutcase. I was crazy. And I just, it was more than drugs. It's really always about more than that. And I needed a lot of that sort of discipline. It's life. Life goes on. Life happens. Things flare up.
Life. Yeah.
I don't know.
All right, who wants to go first on that one?
What do you need to hear, Scott?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Jeez. Yeah, there's a lot of pent-up stuff in there. How does it look like that?
Stuff, and there isn't the words to describe it. Now, in this situation, they're on TV. So are they really going to go into, look, here's how we talk about it in our family. It's called this. It looks like this. But what does he say? A real nutcase, crazy, more than drugs. It's not about that. It's life. things flare up. I don't know. It's like, hang on, tell me what happens. What exactly do you call this and what happens? Because without being able to name it and know what it is, you can't exercise it. You can't control it unless you've got a name for it. But maybe they don't want to use the names for it.
Did you see the contempt when he said maybe 18 rehabs is not enough? Did you see contempt on his face rise so quickly? It's like, really?
That's a lot, man. That is, you spent a lot of your life in rehab. If you've had 18 and you're like in your early 20s, holy smokes. And after a while, that becomes your identity. You're the person that knows all about. That's why they use people who were addicts or who are addicts, whatever, how you say it the right way.
The mainstream media is not broken at all. It is functioning exactly as it was designed. It exists to manipulate you, to divide you, to feed you.
What is this here? Why is this like in the middle of this?
Fear and outrage and distraction while pretending all of that is information. And most people are still swallowing it like it's gospel. I've spent years studying propaganda and psychological operations and human behavior. And I will tell you this plainly. The media is not here to tell you the truth. It's here to shape your truth without you even realizing it. Every network, every outlet, left or right or center, they are all playing the exact same game. Keep you emotionally hijacked, cognitively blind, and addicted to narratives engineered by people who have zero interest in informing you at all. So
I mean, I don't know what this is here, but I do agree with him. I think that's exactly what's going on. So take the MSM, for example, mainstream media. Fox, CNN, MSNBC, that's what they do. And how do they do it? Lies of omission, half-truths, leading the witness, as I like to call it, making people emotional and guiding them on what to think and feel. That's what their goal is. Their goal is to get people recruited on their side. Their goal is for ratings, and their goal is attention. Their goal is money. That's it. The goal isn't the well-being of anyone. The goal is those things. So I agree with this guy on this.
they manufacture a bunch of division. They amplify lies and they bury stories that threaten their control. This is not journalism. This is mass psychological warfare. This is why we use ground news. It is not just a news app. It is a tactical weapon for seeing through all this fog. Ground news pulls in all these stories from every source, whether it's liberal or conservative or state-run, corporate-owned, billionaire-owned, and they show you these biases and the ownership of who owns the outlet that wrote that article.
All right, I've had enough of this ad here, but he was right about what he said.
Going on.
To be counselors in those things because they understand that headset, man. So maybe he could have gone on to be an awesome counselor or something. But that after a while becomes, who you are. It becomes your identity. Like you have musicians. Oh, he's a guitar player. Oh, he's a musician, guitar player. And then you have bass players. If you're into music and you're part of the music scenes or whatever, you've got musicians, that group, and that group breaks down into what kind of musician: guitar player, drummer, bass player. And guitar players, drummers, and bass players and keyboard players, those are all assigned a specific personality type as a whole. And most of the time it's not true, but there are a few that sit right in those little pockets for each one of those instruments, and you say, "Oh, there it is. He's a bass player, or he's a guitar player." Or drummers always think like that. So I think in this situation, we're seeing that. I think he's sort of fallen into that position of being the drug rehab guy, maybe.
I think when he says he's crazy, and it was crazy or nutcase, that's the closest that we get to the truth in this clip. And then it's gone. He pulls it back and wraps it in a little wrapper of it was life, it happens, these things just flare up. That sentence, it sounds super casual, but it's a little mini confession. Then there's the emotional retreat and then some weird justification. When somebody calls themselves crazy with no affect and then says things flare up, and he says it like he's talking about the weather. He's essentially saying that he learned to treat escalation as background noise. Escalation is a very normal thing here. Well, and the other thing.
And that could also just be someone that has an impaired empathy too. If you have an impaired empathy, or maybe you're undiagnosed on the spectrum as well, you just don't have the same emotional reactions to things that someone who is neurotypical would. And that's the thing I think that a lot of people that are neurotypical are just not going to understand about the people that are not. So like me, I can get it. I think I can look at them and I would talk to Nick and I'd say, you know what? I see what's going on here. I see what's going on here with him. A lot of it's about his addiction, but also I do think there could have been an element of that undiagnosed autism there. I know they gave him a diagnosis of schizophrenia, but like someone in the chat said, maybe that's something that the lawyer is leaking to try to help their insanity defense. That very well could be too. In terms of someone that's going to rehab 18 times, I mean, apparently one of them worked. Apparently something worked if he was clean for 6 years. I would wonder what actually did help him. If it was medicines that helped him before or what. Because there seems to be a big gap in the timeline here. So this was 2016. Well, it's 2025 now. So what happened between now and then? I don't know.
Institutions do one thing well. That's teach you what the rules are. And what these guys get institutionalized, they learn that culture and what's acceptable to say and not to say. And that doesn't mean they're being forthcoming or truthful. And everybody knows that addicts are some of the best at code switching and becoming what you need them to be. Look, I think, Chase, that point right there is exactly what we're seeing. He's saying what he needs to say for people to brush it aside and keep moving.
Yeah. Chase, your hands look huge when you're sitting back there like that and you bring your hand up. You look like you have giant hands.
Like a skit.
You're sitting there talking to us all, so it's like.
And here's the other thing. Whether Nick was clean or not, I definitely have my suspicions that he wasn't. He didn't have emotional sobriety. So you can be clean from a drug, and this is something you learn in AA and NA. It's that the drug use is a symptom of the real problem. And what's the real problem? Well, they'll tell you there it's the disease of addiction or the disease of alcoholism. And what is that, to be more specific? It's a disease of total self-centeredness. And honestly, when you read a lot about it, it sounds a lot like narcissism to me. That's a lot of it, of what it sounds like. And this is one of the reasons why they say 12-step programs could actually help people that are narcissists, because it cuts to the core of what their problem is. Now, granted, if they can't admit they have a problem, they're not even going to start this process. So don't get your hopes up about anything. But it didn't seem like to me Nick was emotionally sober. It seemed like he was still in a using mindset, whether he was clean or not. And anyone can be using, right? Even if you're not using a substance, you can use sex, you can use shopping, you can use money and power, you can use gambling, you could use pornography. There's all sorts of things to be using to keep that sickness alive. Just because you're clean from a drug or alcohol doesn't really mean you're doing well. That's where the term a dry drunk comes from. Because, okay, you're not drinking, but you're basically doing all of the same toxic behaviors, except you're just not drunk.
Yeah, they're huge.
Like the Everlong video?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Maybe not 18 rehabs, you might have gotten there quicker, or no?
I think it needed to happen the way it happened. I was a real nutcase. I was crazy. And I just, it was more than drugs. It's really always about more than that. And I needed a lot of that sort of discipline. It's life. Life goes on. Life happens. Things flare up.
Life. Yeah.
I don't know.
What about mom?
I didn't go to either of them because neither of them believed a word I said, but it was sort of comforting to talk to her because she was a little bit more in touch with her emotions and how she felt about it. And he was sort of trying to, follow orders, I guess.
So what do you guys think?
If you've got a kid that's an addict, you've got a pretty volatile thing going on. When you're addicted, your behavior is already out of control. You're scared of yourself. There's a lot of shame going on. You're kind of lost. And then on top of all that, you reach out to the people you should trust most and they don't believe you. That's a big effing deal. And as an adult, that same person might just say just enough to be understood, but never enough to be vulnerable around anybody, or just using humor to distract from everything, or pulling back if things get any kind of emotional. And we're seeing a lot of that. Like, they didn't trust me then, and this is the end result. And I think he's being honest. This is crazily honest here.
But I think you also, if you pay attention to Rob when he's talking, when Nick is talking, watch him. I think I see chin boss engagement, but I certainly see floor searching, inner voice, emotion, looking down left for inner voice. That's you talking to yourself, looking down right for emotional eye accessing. So you can see he's feeling something, and shame or guilt usually is associated with that chin boss, as we say. So all that coming together, I think he doesn't like the words he's hearing. He's not angry. He probably feels some sorrow associated with this thing as well. Look at that increased respiration, withdrawn sides of the mouth. It's powerful to watch.
His head starts going down too.
Yep.
Which is interesting.
You know, I'm kind of interested that you see Nick's eyes going up and around here, this kind of search as he's talking about emotion.
And that's actually eye movement I've seen with schizophrenia a little bit, sometimes autism as well. But I remember that from my rehab days. I've seen that. I've seen the guys do that rolly around thing.
Instead of going down to the emotions again. And I keep pushing at this. I don't think he has words, or certainly not words. I don't think actually he has words. It's not the situation, because his eyes are searching for what to call the emotions and the feelings. And again, if you can't give them some name, even if it's the wrong name, if you can't name them in some way and delineate one feeling from another feeling and who they belong to, you can't control them in any manner.
I don't think he knows what they are. I don't think he knows what they are. I don't think he's familiar with a lot of those things, because we don't see any emotion. He doesn't seem to connect when emotion comes up like you.
And if you have autism, what do they call that? Alexithymia. Dr. Carey and I went over that, right? Where autistic people, they have a really difficult time identifying what they're feeling. It takes them a long time to actually recognize it. She said it took her sometimes up to a week. And so that's basically what they're talking about here, alexithymia. They don't have the language for it, but especially with autistic people, that is absolutely something that happens with them.
In the other video we watched, in the other episode, where the guy thought he was being funny, and he started laughing, his dad starts laughing, and he doesn't even see that. So I don't know if I think his problem with connecting with people is not understanding what those emotions are. I'm not saying he's autistic or anything. He may be. I don't know. No earthly idea. But I don't think that disconnect from his emotions is. And understanding what they are is really interesting to me.
Well, what's interesting for me is if you've ever been around anyone who is profoundly depressed, you automatically assume that's emotional. It's catatonic when they're it's soul robbing when you're around somebody who's like that, because they just don't have feelings in the way that you expect them to. Are they sad? It's beyond sad for them, I think. And somebody who's much smarter than me about depression, who makes a living at it, probably can tell us down at the bottom what exactly you would call that. But having been around somebody that you love who has zero ability to feel, because they're just, and that's the way they describe it. So maybe there's some of that here.
Or those feelings are repressed in such a way that they are bubbling. Then they have no name. They can't be controlled. And so then what happens when they do come forward? Are they out of control? Does it become psychotic? Does it become not neurotic in any way, but psychotic in that there is no attachment to reality anymore?
But I think it could also be neurotic. If you're autistic and you don't know it, that's the thing, right? If you don't know it, then things don't make sense yet. And this is where sometimes a label and a diagnosis can really help people to make sense out of things. Like when I started learning about autism, for me, it made so many things begin to make sense. And I was able to find that comfort, like, okay, all these people have these similar experiences to me, and I understand now. It makes what I was feeling and going through, it makes it make sense. But maybe Nick never got that moment. Maybe he never got diagnosed with that. I don't know if he truly got diagnosed with schizophrenia or not, but it probably would have been helpful for him to find some sort of community of like-minded people, or people that are struggling with something similar. And it doesn't even have to be just addiction. It could have been mental health stuff. And this is where Reddit comes into play. There's a subreddit for everything now. Literally anything you can think of, there's a subreddit for. And this is maybe where his status and wealth might have gotten in the way. Maybe he thought he was better than them, better than the plebes out there. Maybe. I'm just guesstimating that could have been what it was, but maybe that's something that kind of buffered him from others. I don't know.
Or maybe he starts massaging the vulnerability here. He starts backpedaling with the softening language and vague language goes up rapidly. He says it was sort of comforting to talk to her. She was a little bit more in touch with her emotions. He was sort of trying to, follow orders, I guess. Just tons of distancing language. It was right after the honest statement we heard the kind of the backpedal retreat back into that vague language.
Yeah, maybe it's a learned behavior.
I think it is. Just he learned early, be vague, soft, don't accuse, don't name it too early, all that kind of stuff.
What about mom?
I didn't go to either of them because neither of them believed a word I said, but it was sort of like comforting to talk to her because she was a little bit more in touch with her emotions and how she felt about it. And he was sort of trying to, follow orders, I guess.
Look at his darty eyes. Did you see that? I'll go back here.
She was a little bit more in touch with her emotions and how she felt about it. And he was sort of trying to, follow orders, I guess.
What worked for you that mom and dad did and what didn't?
Everything, what worked is when they kind of were like, you know what, they turned their back and they were like, you got to figure it out for yourself. You're an adult now, this is getting old, sort of not like we don't care, but just
what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it fits this model of addiction being arrested development. And so there's as you were suggesting, there's a 20-year-old here, 23-year-old, who's sounding to me like a 14-year-old.
And see, this is what I do agree with this. As someone who's been to those rooms, I say, and what they say in the rooms is when you start using, your maturity level stunts and you stop growing. But then when you're clean, you can begin the maturing and developmenting process again. And this is one of the reasons why drug use before your brain is fully developed is so harmful. So you're using when you're 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. That's devastating. That's devastating for the developmenting brain. But what happens is you become stuck in this totally self-centered place. And again, it's not the only reason why you're stuck. You might also have a personality disorder. You might also have other things going on like mental illness. But when you're constantly using, you don't get that time to grow and mature and to simply grow up. But it seems like he was stuck in that constant adolescence, for lack of a better word. And that's why addiction can be so harmful. And not only harmful to themselves, but harmful to others as well.
Right now. And he's being told, grow up. But you can't just grow up. You have to be given situations where you're helped, not made to or grown up for you, but you are protected somewhat to the mistakes that you can make as you're growing up.
It's funny, Mark, I watched another interview with him when he said, what do you think caused you to get involved with drugs? And he said, my father and my grandfather, he in effect says, are icons. What am I going to do? And he said, I have no meaning, no purpose, no passion, no place to go. So I turned to drugs to be more outlandish and to define myself to be the bad boy.
And he was homeless a couple of times.
And that's possible. I mean, what does that also speak to? It speaks to envy, a little bit of a victim card. And what kinds of people do that? Narcissistic people do that, right? So maybe he wants to build an identity and he wants to be the bad boy. But with him, unfortunately for him, when you're awkward like that, when you try to play the bad boy, it just doesn't really come off well. You come off more like the school shooter than you do like the cool, fun bad boy, unfortunately for him. But that's what happens. And this is the thing, I think movies do keep people's addictions alive in a way, where back in my using days, I would watch movies like Pulp Fiction or Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas or Blow and all these. And it just kind of keeps that energy going. And it's silly, and some people would say, well, it's ridiculous. But for me, it was true. And I was like kind of using it to fuel fantasy, for lack of a better word. And that also speaks to the fact you don't need the substance to be using. All it takes is fantasy sometimes to be using.
I heard what I have heard. Now, hearing this stuff, nothing that you've heard day one is probably right. I heard he was homeless in multiple states. So he's like 7 times or something he was homeless.
But right here, we get this verbal version of a shrug. There's no ending. There's not really a full thought. There's no actual opinion. It's just, kind of like, sort of like, and that's just a deflection. I think he's trying to express something true, but he's getting trapped in some kind of conflict avoidance pattern trap kind of a thing. But what is under that is they gave up on me, and maybe that actually helped. But to say that super plainly would risk sounding maybe ungrateful or like he's blaming them. So we get this messy, super padded, you know what I mean, sort of version.
And again, maybe that's a clue there too. He said, oh, they left me on my own, and that helped. So it's almost like him acknowledging that, okay, yeah, I have to do this. I have to take ownership. I have to take accountability and responsibility and step up. And he's right. And so if his parents had awareness, and maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but if you sense that and you say, okay, yeah, that's what they need. He needs to do it on his own. He needs to build the strength to overcome adversity, overcome challenges. You can't just solve them all for him. And that's sometimes with being in a super wealthy family, that's what it does. You don't have to overcome as many obstacles because so many of them are just not there. I mean, having a lack of money creates a lot of obstacles for people to overcome. But when you're born wealthy, a lot of those obstacles just aren't there. And I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of celebrities' kids can turn out a little wild. Now, Clint Eastwood, to his credit, he treated his kids like they were very normal people. He gave them no handouts. So if you listen to Scott Eastwood, Clint Eastwood's son, he seemed to turn out okay because he made him work. He was like a bartender. He did regular jobs in high school. He got no handouts. And so he had to learn, okay, nothing's going to be handed to me. I have to earn it.
He did that a lot too in the other videos when he was talking. He would leave words out. He would end sentences with you knowing what the words were going to be, but he would end them there. I do that a lot when I get all worked up on here and get to talking fast because I'm so excited about what's happening. So he may have a whole lot going on up there and have a lot to say about that and is still trying to edit himself, but he's not far enough out ahead of it to get it edited properly.
Well, I think you can't parent an adult. You can't. You get the chance to parent your child until they're a certain age, and then you feel obligated for the rest of that time, and you think you're going to rescue them and do this or this or this. And I think if you listen, if you go, there's a ton of this interview out there. If you go back and listen, that we didn't cover, not this one, but the other, he talks about them putting him in too early, or Reiner himself says, maybe we shouldn't have put him in that first time we went to rehab. So who knows? Mark, to your point, maybe he felt like he didn't get the chance to grow. We'll never know, because we're not going to hear anything else from this guy probably.
And when somebody says 50 words to say almost nothing, it's usually because there's a price to pay to say the actual thing.
I think we'll hear more from him, a lot more, because you know who his attorney is, right?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Jeff?
No.
What's his name? He was Karen Reed's attorney.
That guy.
Yeah. He's a big, high-profile Hollywood attorney.
Yeah, what was his name?
I know it. It's another famous person.
We just went over it in the last video, but I forget what it is too.
Name.
Hang on a minute. Let's see if Alexa knows. Alexa, who is Nick Reiner's attorney?
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
I'll find it.
Who is Mark?
Alan Jackson.
There it is.
Just ask her who I am. Just
have you ever Googled your how much you're worth, your net worth?
Oh yeah,
you did that.
I told you mine used to be like $250 million. I was like, oh yeah, everybody's gonna think, and now it's like $2 million. You know, and then sometimes it tells me it can't find my net worth.
That's
it changes. You refresh the page, it'll change every time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's why it says at the
No, I'm
bottom.
talking about with Alexa.
Oh, Alexa.
Yeah.
Same.
So. Oh, and Mark, they think you're a writer most of the time.
Yes,
They
well,
think you're
because
the author.
Yeah. Well, I have some stories about.
Oh, really? Did you go to a gig and they thought they got him? Let's have it.
I had. Who did he write a book about? The drug dealer.
Which one?
The cartel guy.
Escobar.
Pablo Escobar. So I was in Japan. I was in Tokyo, and I get a call on my phone. I'm like, okay, that's an interesting number, and I take the call, and the guy goes, "Yeah, this is I'm part of Escobar's crew." I can't remember the exact terminology that he used, and we're very upset with what you said about him.
That's not the guys you want to piss off.
In your book. Okay. And we're very upset about you, what you said in the book, and we're going to come and get you. Net of all of it. And I was very, very jet lagged in a very foreign country, and I probably had a few drinks. And I said, well, I'm in Tokyo, so come and have a go. And then went on to say, by the way, you got the wrong person, and how dare you? And got quite irate. And the guy apologized. He said, I'm really sorry. He said, I'm really sorry. I've had a few drinks. And everybody had a few drinks. He apologized. I said, that's all right. No harm done, no harm, no foul. And we let it lie. We let it go.
Wow. Funny.
There you go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What worked for you that mom and dad did and what didn't?
Everything, what worked is when they kind of were like, you know what, they turned their back and they were like, you got to figure it out for yourself. You're an adult now. This is getting old.
And you know what that also reminds me of? If your parents are controlling, and maybe because they're narcissistic, they're always up your ass about everything. And it feels like you have no freedom. They're always telling you what to do and what not to do. And then if that's what you're used to, what do you want to do? You want to rebel. You want to do anything but what they say, and I even have some of this to this day because I just hate being controlled still because of it, because that's exactly what happened to me. My parents were very controlling. One was narcissistic, and it was hideous. And all I wanted to do was get the hell out of there. And so him saying this makes me think, maybe that's a little bit of what was going on with him too. And he wanted that freedom to make his own choices and be his own person. But that's what narcissistic parents deprive their kids of, the ability for them to be their own person, the ability to develop their autonomy, to individuate, because it just doesn't happen in those cases.
Sort of not we don't care, but just I don't know.
Okay, apparently you've got one more to tell, Mark.
Oh, yeah. So I get a call from my agent. She says, so they want you on Newsnight. Said, really? Okay. They want,
because you'd think that's normal,
right?
All the time.
Exactly.
All the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Newsnight, hard hitting. They want you on Newsnight to talk about Osama bin Laden. So I'm like, okay,
do that.
Okay, I can do. Yeah, literally, I can do that. I can do that. Who's in the interview? I was with Jeremy. Jeremy's doing the interview. Okay. All right. Fine. All right. Great.
And to note, it's not blaming parents to call out what maybe narcissistic parents were doing. That's just an accurate portrayal of the situation. Does that mean that everything those kids do is those parents' fault? No, that's not what it means. But what we're doing here is describing the experiences a lot of people with narcissistic parents had.
I said, before I head up to the BBC, just check out they have the right Mark Bowden here, because there is a Mark Bowden who wrote quite an important book about Osama bin Laden and global terrorism.
I thought you were telling you when.
She gives the call and she's like, yeah, they wanted the other one. I said, yeah, I thought they might. But she said, with you just can't tell. You just can't. I would say, yeah, you're right. You can't tell who's going to ask me. You just can't tell. Anything could happen.
Well, Mark, I can see you. Well, someone lands in the passion plane.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I do.
They're like, what?
There's another Chase Hughes.
Okay.
I've seen him on LinkedIn.
He's a reporter for the Washington Wizards, I think, like a basketball team or something.
Okay.
And I occasionally get emails for him. And then, so I started talking to Chase Hughes on Twitter.
Yeah.
And now when he gets contacts for me, he'll be like, oh, here's Chase's actual email. And I'll share his contact info with people.
Well, for a while, when I first started doing all this stuff and I'd go online, there was a hockey player, played for Atlanta. There was a goalie for a rugby thing or one of those kind of sports. And then there was a doctor who did circumcisions and had banned them and was fighting that. So it was like, you get a weird, somebody contacts you, you're like, I don't know anything about that. I think you got the wrong guy.
But now, Greg, you're actually doing brisses, are you? And getting paid?
Yeah.
You got his Moyle license, and that's all. He's got a little shop. Just come over and get.
It's a great way to make extra money, Greg. I don't blame you.
Yeah, I don't think it's mine, but yeah.
And he loves it. He absolutely loves it, Mark. You should see him at work. He sent me videos. It's gross, but it's hilarious. The look on his face, he's so intent.
The best
he's so excited.
Apparently.
They treat him like loyalty.
Very nice.
All right.
Very nice.
On that
was so good.
On that dead joke.
Hang on a minute. That was good. That was good, Chase. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
They've kind of lost me on this one. I don't know what they're talking about anymore.
That was funny.
Yeah. Okay.
Your timing was perfect.
All right. Well, that's another interesting video. Mark, how'd things look to you?
Yeah. Look, net of all of this, there's a lot being said here, but not being said. There's no words for it. But it's an interview show, so what do we expect here in a show? But we're getting hints at something here. As was being said, maybe we'll never really understand exactly what the psychology or pathology, or it might be in this situation. Chase, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants their family dynamic dissected in public, any of us, no matter how good it is. This is a horrible situation, horrible end, but we get a little bit of insight before it happened. Scott?
Yeah, I agree. And personally, I think it's a lot of that pent up aggression from being so, from hollering back and forth at each other. When you're dealing with somebody who's got a drug problem like that, even though he may not be on, be all drugged up there or anything, there's a lot of things you keep, after those. A lot of people, they say a lot of things during that, I don't know if y'all ever been to one of those things where everybody comes in, you got to talk to your friend about, them being an addict or whatever. Man, they get upset when you do. They don't like that at all.
There was a show about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I'm sure, especially within a family, there's got to be that stuff that you say that just you're never going to forget it. And I'm sure there's a lot of that in there. And that may be what we're seeing from that. But again, you can't do that on TV. You can't discuss all that stuff, especially when you're selling a movie or something.
Well, that's the shame, Scott, because that's what we brought you here for today.
The hot chicken addiction.
Somebody has to.
Like Hattie B's addiction.
Yeah. Has to stop.
Yeah. And I'll start off with how it's affected me.
And that's one of those things where you just say, I did a lot of things that were embarrassing, but luckily I put them in the movie. And if you want to go into detail,
yeah.
And then you get more people to watch the movie.
Yeah. But he's not good at selling it.
That's true. Chase, have you been drinking that blue stuff?
Yeah.
Go like this. There it is.
All right.
My teeth blew.
I've had enough of them. So let's go to Nick Reiner's actual podcast here. Dopey Podcast. Which one should we play?
Hello and welcome to Dopey, the podcast on drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. My name is Dave. Normally on Mondays, we're replaying the interview from 2 weeks ago, but there was a horrible tragedy, which is Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle, were murdered last night, and they've arrested Nick Reiner. And Nick Reiner is their youngest son, and he was on Dopey 4 times. The first time he was on Dopey, he had just written a film with a guy he knew in rehab called Being Charlie, which was basically about his life as an addict and his early life in recovery. And it uncovered a lot of the dysfunction in the Reiner family. And I was such a fan of Rob Reiner. I grew up watching All in the Family. I grew up watching Laverne and Shirley, and Nick calls in. So I'm going to play them back to back. But before I play anything, I just want to make sure you guys know that we didn't have microphones.
And when was it?
I have such a bad memory that it could have been a year ago. It could have been 6 months ago. It was around 6 months ago.
It was like January, right?
Yeah, January.
Because you told me about Nick, and then we'll introduce him.
First, before we tell the story, today we have film writer and famous actor Nick Reiner.
Yep.
Thank you. I'm not much of an actor. I did write one film.
You're not in that movie?
No.
I'm a fucking idiot.
No, you're not, because the guy's name is Nick. So
notice this already. Notice how much more comfortable he sounds without his father's presence. So, and maybe you could also say those are all public interviews, but I do think it says something when your father's there. That could also influence how you are. But notice he seems more comfortable in himself in this. So let's see what unfolds with this.
Robinson is
exactly. So it's.
I thought that was your nom de plume.
I would hate myself if I had a nom de plume. But I think what is important is that when I wrote that, the best thing that came out of that was being on the Howard Stern show. And the 15 minutes that I got to be on there was incredible.
He was on the Howard Stern show for 3 minutes.
You were.
I was on, it was 10 minutes. And I was on the Howard Stern show. I lied my way on the Howard Stern show.
What would you say?
It's a whole thing.
We've said it several times in the show, but
I'll tell you briefly. I had a show, like a music show 20 years ago, and I wanted to get on the Howard Stern show, and I knew that there were like 3 ways to get on. Like I could get naked, and wear a sign that says Howard Stern rules, or I could on the street, you know what I'm saying? Because he would put people on like that.
I don't know if this is going to be interesting at all. He's kind of boring me already. Let's see. What should we play next, though, if not that? Yeah, I mean, it's possible that Rob Reiner was absolutely an overbearing father. I don't necessarily get narcissist vibes from him, but he might have been narcissistic. And if you're narcissistic, you're a little controlling and overbearing. And if you're a kid, especially if you have undiagnosed autism or diagnosed autism, as some have said in the chat, and you have those other issues going on, you just don't connect. You don't connect and you want to get the hell out of there. And none of that's an excuse, by the way. But that's just could have been what's going on with him. Yeah. And the other 2 children are okay. At least as far as you can tell, right? The brother and the sister there, they seem pretty good. They seem pretty good. I'm not sure if he tried to threaten his sister or not, Zelda. Anything's possible. I mean, he threatened that dog right in front of his sister, right? Let's see. Yeah, but that's pretty much it, though. Is there anything else you guys wanted me to go over here? Any other interviews to play out there that you think would be interesting? Oh, yeah, there's going to be some documentaries. There's going to be there'll be books written about this. It's going to be a moneymaker. Let's see. Oh, this is a good one.
Nick Reiner grew up with incredible privilege in a family of Hollywood royalty. He also grew up in a family that appeared to love him no matter what. But now Nick Reiner is sitting in jail accused of an unthinkable crime of killing his parents with a knife inside their LA mansion. And new details are coming out about the days leading up to the murders of Rob and Michelle Reiner. And I'll tell you the new report that is out shedding light on the mindset and the potential mental health issues that Nick Reiner was diagnosed with in recent weeks and how that could factor into his defense, but also what potential prosecutors may point to prove that this wasn't just a murder, it was a premeditated killing. We're on The Case, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart.
And premeditated, from what I can gather about him, it seems like you could make a good case for that, honestly.
Hey, before we get into the latest on this case, I want to talk about one of the biggest partners and sponsors for On the Case.
Morgan & Morgan, we all know them. But this is a good question here, too. This one. I mean, how can you sleep at night in your mansion while your kid is homeless doing drugs and can die all alone somewhere? Well, it's what you would call tough love. Because sometimes when there's these kinds of issues, you have to protect your family. Like, what if your son is stealing from everyone in the house? What if they're SAing, as an example? Like, there's all sorts of things that could happen. So in those cases, you want them out. You have to protect yourself. And you have to protect your wife if you're Rob Reiner.
Which is one of the most watched shows on YouTube. It's America's largest personal injury weeks leading up to Rob and Michelle's murders. Now, the outlet also is citing a source that claims that Nick's medications were making him erratic and dangerous. That has not been officially proven, but a major report coming out from TMZ.
I mean, that sounds like a blaming of the medicine. And that could also easily be fed from the defense attorney. Oh, yes, it's the medicine's fault. It's like, I don't know about that. Now, granted, there is a risk factor when you try new medicines and stop medicines, and you have to wonder, are they also med compliant? A lot of people with schizophrenia in particular, they don't like being med compliant, so they constantly stop. My friend who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, he would get a reward when he stopped, like he would feel better. And that feeling better period was tricky for him because he'd get an initial mania, but then it would turn like not so good. So that's something to look out for. It also reminds me of Billy's character from 6 Feet Under. Now, Jolly, if you're in the chat, I know you really like 6 Feet Under. And that's what Billy would struggle with too, I think. He had bipolar, I think was his diagnosis. But people with bipolar, they sometimes don't like being med compliant because they enjoy the manias. But you can't have the manias without also having the depressions. And what people who are bipolar will complain about is, well, they take their mood stabilizer, Lamictal, lithium, or fill in the blank with whatever it is. They don't get the ups anymore. They also don't get the downs, but they don't get the fun highs. And so they don't like that.
Rob Reiner, Nick's dad, he was a Hollywood institution, and he was married for a long time to his wife, Michelle Reiner. Rob Reiner rose to fame in the 1970s. He was an actor in All in the Family. His dad, Carl, was a comedian. But then Rob Reiner became a director, and he had incredible range as a director, directing one of the most famous rom-coms of all time, When Harry Met Sally, and then the courtroom drama, A Few Good Men, which went on to be nominated for an Oscar. He also continued to act as he appeared in comedy shows like New Girl recently, and also this year made an appearance on the hit show The Bear. There's no doubt that Rob Reiner was an American treasure when it came to the world of show business. But inside that mansion, the place where Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle had lived for decades, their family appeared to have faced the challenges that many families have faced, no matter their tax bracket, when it comes to having a loved one who has struggled with addiction and perhaps mental health issues. Nick Reiner is one of Rob and Michelle's 3 children. Nick is 32 years old. He told People in 2016 that he struggled with addiction since he was just 15 years old, a young teenager. And even though he grew up with incredible wealth, he says that he spent time homeless.
It looks like he's a little more healthy in this picture than in many of the other pictures I've seen of him. Doesn't look as crazy here. I don't know if this is one of his clean periods or something, but it doesn't look as bad here.
In Maine, in New Jersey, and in Texas, and even in moments of sobriety, it appears that Nick Reiner battled a desire to go back to his old life. This is what he told a podcast that focuses on drug addiction called Dopey 7 years ago in an episode that is still public on YouTube.
What ended your sober run?
I don't know. I just didn't want to be away from home, and I just wanted to come back home.
but you also wanted to get back to smoking weed and whatever. I'm not judging you, Nick. I'm just like the show. Like there's there's thousands.
You know what it really was?
What?
You know what it really was? It was like I kind of knew that I wanted to relapse, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even want to call it a relapse. I just wanted to get back to my old life of like smoking weed, kind of taking some pills, like doing whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I started to do it back in Maine, I wouldn't really be able to do it.
Many people will tell you that addiction is something.
So they say people pick up in their minds way before they pick up actual in reality. And he's basically proving that there. Yeah, he picked up in his mind. He made the choice, the conscious choice. And again, a lot of these things, these decisions, they're choices. They're not things where people are just losing control. It's like what maybe narcissists would try to say, right? I lost control. Or it's just a defense. It's like, nah. A lot of times, you know exactly what you're doing. And you know exactly why you're doing it. But you're trying to play dumb and use the plausible deniability card to avoid accountability. In fact, 80 to 90% of the time, I would say that's what it is. And that's why I really liked Dr. George Simon's book, In Sheep's Clothing and Character Disturbance, because he goes over that. And he says, yeah, a lot of these guys, they know exactly what they're doing. They're just pulling the wool over people's eyes and manipulating them, which I think is absolutely true. They are.
That sticks with people, and it is a daily struggle. And that appears to have been at least somewhat of the case with Nick, to the point that in recent weeks, people say they were somewhat concerned about him and that there were major red flags about his behavior. Now, according to TMZ, again, recently, he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. That's what the outlet is reporting. TMZ also put out a story about employees at a gas station, apparently near where the Reiners lived in LA, a place where Nick often went to pick up cigarettes. And employees felt in recent weeks, in the days leading up to the Reiners murders, that Nick looked drained. And he was acting standoffish in a way that they considered abnormal to what he typically was when he came in. Now, you then take that account, allegedly, and then you compare it to the stories of how Nick was reportedly acting the night before his parents were found dead in their home, when all of them, Rob, Michelle, and Nick, went to reportedly a holiday party at Conan O'Brien's, where Nick was said to be walking around the party, demanding to know whether partygoers were famous, reportedly making people feel very uncomfortable. This is according to The Hollywood Reporter. Some people actually thought at that party that Nick was someone who had wandered in from the street. They didn't know who he was. Now, The Hollywood Reporter also says that Rob Reiner had asked Conan if Nick could come with him to the party. And you have to wonder just how worried the Reiners were about Nick's mental health, about the substance abuse issues that he had been struggling with. And Nick's behavior at that party was apparently so disturbing that Rob and Nick ended up getting into a massive argument, according to TMZ, that many people saw at this party. Hours later, police say Nick killed Rob and Michelle with a knife, allegedly stabbing them multiple times.
Today, I'm here to announce that our office will be filing charges against Nick Reiner, who is accused of killing his parents, actor-director Rob Reiner, and photographer-producer Michelle Singer Reiner.
Now, that is the moment the district attorney for Los Angeles announced the charges that Nick is now facing. And that brings us to the argument that prosecutors are making that Nick committed first-degree murder. Now, it's unclear what specific evidence prosecutors have that truly links Nick to the killings of his parents. The DA said that a knife is believed to be the murder weapon, but the DA wouldn't confirm whether they actually have that weapon. I spoke to criminal defense attorney Natalie Whittingham-Burrell about what prosecutors may have to prove when it comes to first-degree murder, and this is what she told me. We also know there is reportedly more than one scene linked to the murders. At 4 o'clock Sunday morning, so hours after the family left this holiday party at Conan O'Brien's, Nick checked into a hotel in Santa Monica, which is about 4 miles from his parents' house. The next morning, staff found the room covered in blood. This is according to TMZ. The outlet also said that Nick...
and as I mentioned the other day, a knife attack is a very intimate attack and shows much more about anger than I would say as opposed to a shooting. You can be a little more detached in a shooting, but a knife attack, slitting of throats, no, not at all. That's very intimate, a very intimate process.
looked, quote, tweaked out when he checked in with a credit card. They do mention that he didn't seem to show any signs of having been in a physical altercation when he arrived at the hotel. Nick's parents' bodies were found around 3:30 in the afternoon on Sunday. This was reportedly after a massage therapist couldn't get access to the property per local media. And it's been reported that Romy Reiner, Nick's sister, found what had happened, but she only thought that her dad had been killed. People reports that she was told by first responders that her mom had also lost her life. I spoke this week with Professor of Applied Forensics at Jacksonville State University, Joseph Scott Morgan, about what evidence collected from the scene may tell investigators about what potentially happened. And just as a warning, the reality of what happened is believed to be incredibly gruesome. Listen to this.
Chris, that's up close and personal. You know, it's not like you can do this at arm's length, okay? You have to be in this individual space. And you have to have a will to do this. This takes a
Intimate, yes.
tremendous amount of energy. All we have to do is look at Idaho, for instance, and any number of other cases involving edged weapons. It takes sustained attacking. It also takes, well, I don't know how to paint this. It also, to me, anytime I see this, and particularly when you're talking about multiple, you think of a maniacal person that's doing this, because one of the terms that we apply in death investigation to a knife attack where you have multiple injuries is actually overkill. And I'm not saying that that's what this is. It sounds like it, because we're getting reports that...
And that's why they say rage. Rage is behind a lot of knife attacks. And that's maybe I should go over next, is what it means, like what it says about the psychology of the killer to use a knife in this way. Go to like the FBI's BAU, Behavioral Analysis Unit.
You know, the big thing has been like, you know, throats have been cut. Well, they didn't say that, you know, in the release. That's speculative. However, it's certainly plausible. And then and that's a slice or an incised wound. Then you have stab wounds. So there's two separate types of sharp force injuries that you can have. There's one other one that's called puncture wounds, but it's not related to this, not like with an edged weapon. So think about stabbing. Stabbing is deeper than long in relative to the injury, and slicing or incising is longer, but it's more shallow. Okay. So let's just go with this idea that if throats were cut, and I've seen this over and over again, you have to have a victim that is in a kind of assured position where they're up against a surface and you can apply weight and pressure and drag the leading edge of that blade across the neck. I'm not saying that it's not possible, like in Hollywood, where you have some kind of slasher movie where somebody will come out of the dark and just slash somebody's throat. I guess that's possible.
That would be a pretty lucky swipe. Like, no, this has to be like very intentional and very like in your face to do this to actually completion.
Most of the time, there has to be a considerable amount of force that is applied. You have to have the person pressed or anchored against something and then pressed down. That's what makes this all the more horrific.
About 6 hours after the bodies were found, Nick was arrested roughly 15 miles inland from his parents' house near the campus of USC. There's surveillance video first obtained by NBCLA that shows Nick at a gas station buying what looks like some kind of sports drink. And then he walks outside the gas station across the street, and that is when officers move in for the arrest. Now, Nick's battle with addiction, it has been incredibly public, but it's still unclear whether he was under the influence of anything the night that he is accused of killing his mom and dad. He has hired a famous and who we believe to be very expensive defense attorney, Alan Jackson. He is the same attorney who...
And I wonder how he did this, though. Like, how did he hire this attorney? Who's spending the money to do it? Is there some sort of trust or conservatorship? Like, I don't know.
Defended Kevin Spacey and, of course, Karen Reed in her case where she was accused of killing her Boston police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe. Jackson was able to get a not guilty verdict in the Reed case. The type of legal defense that comes with Alan Jackson, it's not cheap. He once told Vanity Fair that the tab for both of Karen Reed's trials, it was more than $10 million. Now, he said that he didn't charge her full price. It is unclear what Nick Reiner actually did for work. He wrote a movie with his dad that his dad directed called Being Charlie that came out around 2015, but it doesn't seem like he really did much after that professionally, at least in the world of show business. We did find this YouTube video from Nick that was posted 9 years ago where maybe he's trying to create a character to get into acting.
And I don't even care if anyone calls me a Sally because I'm a snail and I'm never gonna fail. And you know what? You're gonna have to bail me out of jail.
The video, when you watch it, it's odd, it's bizarre, and it also just kind of shows you the way that Nick speaks and acts at times. Now, obviously this...
And he just comes off as awkward, clumsy, not charismatic. And again, maybe the opposite of what his dad and granddad were, perhaps, which led to more of his feelings of envy. It also reminds me of Gladiator, where Joaquin Phoenix's character murders his father.
It was roughly a decade ago that this video was posted, and still, we don't know much about whether Nick was under the influence of anything at the time that he allegedly killed his parents, or now with this TMZ report out about schizophrenia, first off, whether that is officially true, but then at the same time, did that play allegedly any sort of factor into the murder of his parents? Another big question is, how could Nick afford someone like Alan Jackson, a very expensive lawyer, and a defense that could go on for more than a year, and a defense that could be very expensive when you think of the experts and the amount of detail that will need to go into defending him in what will be an incredibly high-profile case. Now, California has a law called the Slayer Statute, and that stops anyone who's convicted of killing someone from getting money from that person's estate. The New York Post reports that the Reiner's estate, it could be worth $200 million. The New York Post is also reporting that Nick's siblings, maybe they have allowed the estate to fund the defense in an effort to make sure that their brother has an adequate lawyer. That is...
Could you imagine that? What would you do in that situation? Your brother kills your parents. Are you going to make sure that your brother gets adamant legal representation? Or are you going to say to yourself, no, screw you? I would lean more towards actually screw you. But maybe that's not what they did.
It's not clear. That is just a theory that was put out by the New York Post. Nick's siblings did not mention him in their statement that they released to the public that read in part, per CBS News, quote, "Words cannot even begin to describe the unimaginable pain we are experiencing every moment of the day. The horrific and devastating loss of our parents, Rob and Michelle Reiner, is something that no one should ever experience. They weren't just our parents, they were our best friends." Nick has yet to enter a plea to the charges. In court this week, Alan Jackson, his high-powered attorney, told the court that he needed more time before an official arraignment. Nick spoke 3 words when asked by the judge if he was waiving his right to a speedy trial.
Mr. Reiner, do you have a constitutional and statutory right to speedy arraignment? Your counsel is requesting that your arraignment be continued to January 7, 2026. Do you waive your right to a speedy arraignment so that your arraignment can be heard on January 7, 2026?
So you heard him say there, "Yes, Your Honor." That's it. He was then taken back to the county jail. The judge didn't allow media members to take pictures or video of Nick in court as he sat in an enclosed area, according to CNN. But courtroom sketches show him wearing what appears to be a blue vest that defendants often wear so they don't harm themselves. Now, this is what Nick's attorney, Alan Jackson, said after court.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I just have a couple of quick words. First of all, and most importantly, this is a devastating tragedy that has befallen the Reiner family. We all recognize that. Our hearts go out to the entire Reiner family. There are very, very complex and serious issues that are associated with this case. These need to be thoroughly, but very carefully dealt with and examined and looked at and analyzed. We ask that process you allow the system to move forward in the way that it was designed to move forward, not with a rush to judgment, not with jumping to conclusions, but with restraint and with dignity and with the respect that this system and this process deserves and that the family deserves. So with that, we are set for January 7th for an arraignment. That's the next court date. And that's all I have to say at this point. There may
And so this is interesting. I heard the siblings have agreed to him getting AJ That's the lawyer. They want him to go to a mental hospital and get help. They say that is what their parents would want for him. Wow. I mean, if that's true, that takes an extraordinary strength of character to still be that understanding.
Be more at some other point, but today we're going to rest on where we stand procedurally, which is this was a continuance of arraignment. Nothing happened today substantively. We'll be back for an arraignment in the same department on the 7th of January. We'll see you then.
Joining us now to talk more about what Nick Reiner's defense could look like is Natalie Whittingham-Burrell, criminal defense attorney. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here on Law and Crime. It's been a week in terms of just digesting everything that police say happened to Rob and Michelle Reiner. From a criminal defense standpoint, what's going on right now with Nick Reiner's defense and what Alan Jackson potentially could be doing in trying to piece together the direction he could take with this case?
Sure. So right now it's very early on in the process, and Mr. Jackson is in a unique position in that he's what you would call, I think, in common parlance, a high-powered defense attorney. So he probably has a bit more connections and cachet with police officers and prosecutors. So he's probably trying to get as much information as possible about what they know about his client and what his client has said. I know he certainly would want to shut down any interaction between his client and the media, his client and law enforcement. He wants to get in there and make sure that, no statements are going through to law enforcement, that he's the one that's getting all the information. Information control is extremely important in the beginning of any case. So I'm sure that that's what he's focusing on. And then more than likely, just given what we've heard in the media, he might be going towards getting Mr. Reiner assessed for mental health, drug and alcohol issues to see whether or not he could have been under the influence at the time that anything occurred, if he made a voluntary or involuntary statement to the police based on his mental state. So he might be looking to get his own expert on mental health and addictions.
When it comes to Nick Reiner's past, we know, and he was public in interviews, that he struggled with addiction. He spent time that he was homeless. And it goes back to when he was a young teenager that he was struggling with addiction. And then, of course, there's just been a ton of stories and anecdotes in the media.
And so what she implied there, but didn't say out loud, is she's wondering if he made a confession, right? That's really what she's saying. And that's where the, are you under the influence, or did you take some sort of psych meds or withdrawal from psych meds? They would try to say something like, well, that wasn't a true confession because I was under the influence, or that wasn't a true confession because of X, Y, or Z. Now, in other cases, I don't think they'd even let you use that as a defense. But when you have a high-powered lawyer, then they're going to leave no stone unturned in terms of defense.
Have come out, questions about his mental health. How could that play into his defense and the story that Alan Jackson may tell if this eventually goes to trial?
Right. So he could be seeking to pursue some type of defense of a diminished mental capacity, because for anything that, first of all, it's the prosecution's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Nick Reiner is guilty, right? That's the first and foremost thing. We know what we've heard in the media. We do not actually know what the evidence of the case is. But let's say that they have enough evidence to prove that it's Nick Reiner who did these things, who killed his parents. Then his attorney would be looking to see whether or not you can raise a defense of he could not have formed the intent because of either a mental health issue or he was under the influence of a certain substance. And in different states, various states, I don't practice in this, the state of California, but in various states where these things do occur, there are ways in which you can put forth an insanity defense. In various states, there are ways in which you can mitigate down a first-degree murder down to a second-degree murder or a manslaughter, greatly diminishing the amount of time that your client is looking at in prison if you can show that at the time of the offense, they could not form the requisite mens rea, meaning that they could not completely understand what they were doing, or they did not have the intent to kill, but they were under the distress of being either intoxicated voluntarily or having some type of mental health problem. So that's why I do think that this is what his attorney would be looking at right now.
What goes into the decision? and there's a long way to go. I mean, if this eventually goes to trial, I mean, we could be, in 2027 knowing all the steps that are going on. But what goes into the decision that Alan Jackson may have to make of that this case may not be about who did it, but why it happened? And I guess what goes into that decision, and then typically how far along in the process is that strategy decision made by a defense attorney?
Yeah. So it just depends on each individual case, right? So some cases, you get the case, it's on video, or you get the case and all things are pointing to your guy did this. That does not mean that as a defense attorney, you just give up and you say, oh, we'll just take whatever the prosecution gives us. And also, you have to take into account that if your client is competent, which I don't know if he's competent or not, but if your client is competent and can make their own decisions, do they want to take a plea? Do they want to just lay down and take whatever it is that the prosecution is offering? Maybe not. So then that is what would drive you towards going to trial. And then, as you said, there could be some mitigating circumstances around it that would make it so that a jury might think, there was some type of justification here. There was some type of mitigation here. There was something that was a force on the person, like their mental health, like drug or alcohol, that would make it so that they committed this crime, but they didn't really have the intent to commit this crime. And if you think you can get that out of a case where it looks like all hope is lost, you might as well take it to trial. That's a lot of the times that's the calculation that we're making, because
So they're going to try to make it seem like it wasn't his intent. That's going to be a hard one. I mean, what does that defense even sound like? It sounds like the narcissist defense when they say, instead of saying they're sorry, oh, sorry, that wasn't my intention. One of the narcissist's favorite apologies. But I mean, to me, in this case, for the prosecution, there's a lot of smoke. And where there's a lot of smoke, there's probably fire. So we'll see. I mean, if anyone's going to be able to do it, a high-powered attorney like him, Alan Jackson, will be able to.
Homicide defense attorney in homicide cases is, listen, this plea offer is really, really terrible. We might as well just take it to trial and see what we can get out of the jury. And we've seen that with Alan Jackson to great effect. I would say with Karen Reed, they had a terrible plea offers for her for what it is, the evidence that they had. And he pushed it and he pushed it and he pushed it and he dug and he dug and he dug. And he got it to the point where the general public and probably the jury was questioning, well, what really happened here? What looked like such an open and shut case at the very outset. She was driving that car, right? She did leave from the scene. She must have hit him. Became, wait, maybe there's something else afoot. Maybe there's something nefarious happening. So there is always a benefit to trying to see what you can push for when you're in a position where there's a dead body, right? It's not always to your benefit to just take whatever offer comes from the state.
And on the note of Alan Jackson, because I'm just, especially after Karen Reed, like just kind of fascinated with the way that he just is in a courtroom and the way he tells a story. And he just seems to have this charisma that is incredibly unique. And that's why he's as successful as he is, and probably why in LA, if you're in trouble, he's one of the first people that you want to call. But as a criminal defense attorney yourself, what does he do that has made him so successful?
He prepares. And that is something I think that is it's plays second fiddle in the public mind to his courtroom performance. His courtroom performance is excellent, right? He has a great courtroom presentation, but he could not have had that without preparedness, especially with the Karen Reed case. The amount of investigation that they put into that is bar none. He and the defense team. And I would imagine that he would bring that same type of preparedness and investigation to this case. I do not anticipate that Alan Jackson would just accept the prosecution's version of events. I would expect that he would do his own investigation into the relationship within the Reiner family, whatever other issues were going on in Nick Reiner's life. They would do that. That's how I see that. Like, they would look into who he was, what was happening with him. They might, break it down from the moment he was born until the moment this event occurred, to see what the surrounding circumstances were, to see how much they can mitigate this case. That is what leads to such a confident courtroom performance. So while I am also impressed by his confidence in the courtroom, his way to wield the spoken word, that comes from preparedness. And that's what he brings to the table.
When it comes to this, because the other, very unique part of the hours leading up to whatever happened to Rob and Michelle Reiner and whoever is responsible, and we'll see how the legal process plays out. It's like you have this A-list party that apparently they were all at Conan O'Brien's house, according to a lot of media outlets. And it's just media outlets at this point talking about it. We haven't really seen a lot of statements. But how might a defense look at those hours leading up? You have this party. He's interacted with a ton of people. How does that factor into building the defense you want to tell if you're someone who is trying to help Nick Reiner in this situation?
Yeah. So that's tough, right? Because if you're the prosecution, you might be looking at that party to, this is the inciting event and this is the motive. And the prosecution is always looking for a motive. There was a fight, that was the motive. That's what led him to plan to kill his parents. Versus if you're the defense, the way that you're telling that story is that there was, discord within the family. He has this longstanding mental health issue and it's not something that he planned. And this inciting event caused him to fly off the handle. This was not planned. This was not premeditated. This is not a first degree, right? So there's different ways in which, depending on what the facts are and what the witnesses say, that could lead to either the prosecution trying to show that we've got some type of premeditation here, and some type of motive, some type of animus towards his parents, or we've got the defense saying, look at how unstable he was. Look at how he was unable to control himself even at this A-list party. This is a person who was not in control of his mental faculties and did not have the requisite intent to commit murder. Instead, he's not guilty by reason of insanity.
It's going to be a close one, I think. I think there's a fair amount of evidence that can prove intent, but there's also a fair amount of evidence that they might be able to get away with insanity. So I don't know which way it's going to go. I really don't. I just presume in America, if you read Iceberg Slim's autobiography, he says, I know why Lady Justice has a blindfold. And he said, it's because she got dollar signs for eyeballs. So the more money you get, the more money you have, the more justice you can get, or freedom, depending on the case.
Or it's mitigated down because of intoxication or something like that.
And again, it's going to be, could be a very long time. I mean, if this trial was held next week, I'm sure that would be a challenge because it is the number one news story, it seems like, anywhere in the country, though there are obviously some other news stories that are going on. But for Nick Reiner, there's been so much focus now on his history of addiction because he was very public with it. He wrote a movie about it. The perception a juror may have if they're aware of who Nick Reiner is like, here's this addict and this is what he did and he was violent. How might the defense battle those perceptions if you end up having jurors who are aware of the story because of all the attention it was getting? Not to mention, it seems like Rob Reiner was someone, I don't know him personally, but was beloved by a lot of people for his work, but then also all the outpouring of support after they were killed.
Yeah, I think expert witness testimony helps you the most with those types of situations. So if his addictions issues and or mental health issues do come into play in this case, say that it is the progenitor for the defense in the case especially, then what Mr. Jackson is going to want to do, and what he will do, is get experts on mental health, get experts on addictions, and or even a toxicologist, and see what are the effects of certain substances on the system and how can they make people behave. That even if you may be morally against taking certain substances, and look at the result of it, it can lead to horrific outcomes.
And think of this. I think 50% of murders are committed with at least alcohol in the system. But alcohol is clearly not a defense in other things. So substances aren't the defense. It has to be more of the mental health / insanity for it to truly work as a defense.
This is what it does to the mind. And this is what long-term use does to a person. And this is what addiction actually is, and how you would play it more towards there's less of an intentionality behind it and more of a compulsion because you are maybe physically addicted to a substance and what that does to you, how that changes your brain chemistry, right? So you take it out of the emotional by making it scientific. You bring on an expert who can testify, and maybe they can't say, yes, he killed his parents because he was on XYZ drug, but they can say this is the effect of this drug on the system. And we know that this drug was in his system. And that gives Jackson enough to argue in closing. This is why you should find him not guilty of, say, first degree or second degree murder.
And for him being charged with first degree murder and prosecutors believing that this was premeditated, that it was, does that necessarily mean it wasn't a spur of the moment event? Because you think of like someone planning a murder, it's like, here's the, the hit list that somebody has and they're going to do it. I mean, when it's first degree murder, what exactly does the prosecution need to prove compared to second degree?
Right. There's different flavors of first degree murder. So you can have first degree murder, which, like you said, something planned well in advance, someone lying in wait, someone writing a list, calling up a hitman, killing somebody like that. That's not the majority of first degree murders. A first degree murder can also form during the premeditation aspect, can form during the act. So unfortunately, my understanding is that this was a stabbing event. And stabbing somebody multiple times and not relenting, not stopping, you can start to realize I'm going to kill this person if I keep stabbing them. And you keep stabbing them and it can become a first degree murder. You could be stabbing the one person, oh my goodness, I don't know what I've just done, but this person is dead. And then you go and you start stabbing the second person. Certainly one could argue that it's a first degree murder as to the second person. The same goes for you shoot at someone. You shoot them one time. Okay, not a first degree murder. You shoot them 20 times. I mean, by shot number 5, you know that what you're doing is killing this person. So yes, it can form during the act, during the event itself. It does not necessarily, and there's many states that are like that. It doesn't necessarily need to be something that you plan well in advance.
And then when it comes to, and the only people that know what this conversation was like likely is Alan Jackson and Nick Reiner, but as someone who is a criminal defense attorney, when it comes to homicides yourself, I mean, what is the initial conversation like? You have this client who is in jail. I don't know what Nick Reiner's mental state was, and all of that. But I guess what is the conversation like? What are the questions during that initial conversation that Alan Jackson is likely asking Nick Reiner?
Right. I don't know his particular approach, but I know for myself and many of my colleagues, the initial approach is usually one of getting to know your client, assessing where they are mentally right now, especially so close to the event itself. We are within days of the killing of his parents. And so what you really want to get to is, number one, who are you? Number two, are you understanding me? Right. And that's, you're just getting, like, you're asking questions, you're getting recall back, trying to see if they remember the things that you spoke about previously, getting some of that life history from the client. I don't, in the first visit, and many of my colleagues do not, start off with tell me what really happened, right? Because honestly, right now, that is not your concern, not at this particular moment. Right now, what you want to do is you want to put a lid on all the information leaking out. You want to make sure that no one's getting information from your client that could be harmful to them. And you're trying to get as much information gathering from the prosecution. You're trying to find out what they have as much as possible. Now, if your client is volunteering to you, I didn't do it, or, oh my goodness, I was this, I was that, then of course you're going to go into that. But you want to be very, very careful not to kill the relationship right away by failing to humanize your client and getting to know them as a person and seeing where they are mentally, physically, emotionally, to see where you're going to go through with this case. And then the facts themselves lend themselves to, he needs to get a mental health professional in to assess him as soon as possible. And he has the ability to do so and the resources. So he should be doing that right away.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens next. Just such a tragic case out of Los Angeles. He'll be back in court on January 7th. Natalie Whittingham-Burrell, criminal defense attorney, thank you for taking the time to be with us here on Law and Crime. We appreciate it.
All right. Now let's see. Psychology. Hmm.
Serial killers have in common. Most serial killers suffer from some kind of personality disorder, usually psychopathy or antisocial personality. The difference between these two disorders is simply nature versus nurture. For example, a psychopath's brain has underdeveloped impulse control and emotional centers from birth. By contrast, antisocial personalities are learned and usually develop during an abusive or neglected childhood.
This might be some AI channel, but in America, antisocial personality disorder is the umbrella, and psychopathy and sociopathy, or a sociopath and psychopath, are just underneath antisocial personality disorder. In other places, though, that's not how they do it. In other places, it can be different.
However, neither of these disorders equals insanity, which is why the not guilty by reason of insanity defense rarely works for a serial killer. Killers deemed criminally insane are not mentally able to discern right from wrong. Serial killers, however, know very well how evil their actions are. They just don't care. In his book, Real Life Monsters, criminal investigator Stephen J. Gianangelo calls the calm, purposeful behavior of a serial killer predatory aggression, comparing it to the aggressive behavior of carnivores. Predatory animals kill simply to satisfy a need. There isn't any rage behind the action.
So this doesn't even fit Nick Reiner, because, I mean, Nick Reiner, how many people do you have to kill for it to be considered a serial killer? I'm trying to find the psychology behind, like, what it means when you use a knife to do it. That's what I'm trying to find.
A vast majority of people who survive knife attacks have absolutely no training whatsoever. Now, does training improve our odds of survivability? Yes. But it's what kind of training matters.
That's Paulo Rubio, the world-famous knife instructor. He's traveled the globe to document the greatest experts in combat.
This is brilliant. Jesse, this is an ancient methodology.
Today, he's invited me to FMJ, a tactical facility usually...
This isn't what I'm looking for either. I can't find what I'm looking for. So we might be wrapping it up here in a minute. What do you mean, Liberty? You can have personality disorder on an axis too? They bled out, and there's a medical term for that. All right. I'm getting tired myself, but if you're here, remember to like the video and watch this stream from the beginning. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Watch some of the, if you want to watch a pretty cool interview, watch my interview with H.G. Tudor. He's a psychopath and narcissist. I think you would all like that very much. And we shall see. But all right. About time to rock and roll here. Thank you, everyone who's been here so far, participating in the chat. My social battery is running low. I appreciate you, trees. Tell a friend. Thank you, Songbits. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'll also... H.G. Tudor, he might be playing a character, right? That's always possible, but it's fun. It's fun to talk to him because I do think he's accurately portraying what at least narcissists would do. Maybe not psychopaths, but at least narcissists, I would say. Corey Feldman, I heard he was saying something the other day about being essayed on set of The Lost Boys. Holy mackerel. You got it, Zelda. I'll have something else exciting for you all tomorrow night too, more than likely. Or Monday. Now, I mean, Nick is more of undiagnosed autism, maybe schizophrenic. Like, I don't know. None of us really know what he was truly diagnosed as, you know? Not had issues with depression. But I would also argue most users probably have issues with depression at a point. Just the ups and downs of drug use can mimic lots of mental health conditions. That's why it just gets so messy. You have to untangle it all, and it's certainly not easy. Absolutely not. Stimulants can give temporary schizophrenia. Yes, they can. And they can make real schizophrenia much worse. And sometimes you can go into a permanent, like, psychosis state. Think Sid Barrett from Pink Floyd. He did this super high-powered acid, and then he never came back. He never came back. Sweet dreams, forget me. But all right, I'm going to rock and roll here. I will see you all tomorrow evening.